Well, government forces in Iraq launching a new offensive to try and take back Anbar province from the radical Islamic terrorists of ISIS. That after that string of stinging defeats. The terror group took control of the key city of Ramadi after we're told Iraqi soldiers actually laid down their weapons and ran. But earlier today on Fox News Channel, former NATO commander Wesley Clark argued that the U.S. should not get more deeply involved in the fight inside Iraq.
Don't get dragged into it, because there's nothing that would reinforce ISIL more than the opportunity to fight on the ground against Americans. Then they could convince every Muslim that they're recruiting that the United States is against Islam. It isn't true, and we don't want to play that game.
So how can ISIS be defeated? Fred Fleitz is a former CIA analyst and a senior fellow with the Center for American Security Policy and joins us now. Fred, always good to see you. Do you think that the Iraqi military is capable of facing and fighting and defeating ISIS?
Eric and Arthel, it's great to be here. Well, since the fall of Ramadi, which really was a catastrophe, after all, Iraqi forces outnumbered ISIS by 10 to 1, there's been a call that we have to have American troops on the ground, and President Obama has to have a real strategy. I think Iraqi troops can win, but they need more support from the United States. But the president wants to do as little as possible. He's not prepared to provide that support because he wants to be known as the president who got the United States out of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I think as long as that limitation is on American troops, the Iraqi army is going to have big problems.
So what type of support would you suggest?
Well, I agree with former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates that we could allow military trainers and military advisors to serve with Iraqi soldiers in the field. This would improve strategy. It would improve morale. They could also serve as spotters for airstrikes, which was a big problem for Ramadi. Gates also thinks that we should let trainers and advisors serve with the Iraqi Kurds, possibly with Iraqi Sunni forces. And I think this could help us stop the gains by ISIS and maybe reverse those gains. I got to say, this will only help us in Iraq. The situation in Syria is much more serious.
Oh, man, I know. Yeah, it is. I mean, it seems almost unstoppable. You heard Wesley Clark, though, say, you know, there are dangers of more Americans going there. It's exactly what these radical Islamic terrorists would want.
I completely disagree with that. Frankly, the parties in Iraq are afraid of ISIS. The Sunnis are afraid of the Iraqi government, the Shiite government. I think a limited American presence, not a combat presence, could make a difference. I mean, I hear what Wesley Clark is saying. I just think he's trying to defend the Obama administration's non-policy for Iraq.
So you think maybe with there are 3,000 on the ground now, they really can't get engaged in combat issues. But as you said, having spotters, is there a number that you would put on it in terms of how many special ops or others we should have?
I think we need more. I don't know what the number would be. And I would also add that part of the strategy has to be changing the number of airstrikes. And we've had stories on this network about pilots are complaining that they're not allowed to hit the targets that they need to hit. If we had better spotters and more airstrikes, Ramadi might not have fallen.
You talk about the pilots complaining. Did you see this editorial in Investors Business Daily? Let me read it to you now about the Islamic State. It says, quote, "The Islamic State has made astonishing territorial gains thanks to an inspired, disciplined, smartly crafted strategy. U.S. forces, meanwhile, are mired in a Vietnam-esque bureaucratic paralysis. Now forced back into Iraq by his creation of the Islamic State monster, Obama is presiding over a half-hearted war effort. Islamic State consolidates power, and Obama lets Iran become a nuclear-armed, dominant power, setting off an atomic arms race in the strategically critical Mideast." Is that fair? And do you believe that the president could have potentially stopped the spread and the creation of the Islamic State to what we've seen it achieve today?
Eric, the president has a plan for Iraq. It's to do as little as he can get away with and hand this mess to the next president. That's why there's limits on the military trainers and advisors. That's why our pilots can't hit targets. He just wants to say he is doing something when he's really doing as little as possible.
Well, and meanwhile, ISIS has continued to advance, and the debate over what we do continues. Fred Fleitz, always good to see you. Thank you.
Good to be here.